I stood frozen in that sterile hospital room as my 8-year-old daughter Melody tugged on the doctor's white coat and said the words that would shatter our entire family. "Sir, should I show you what Grandma mixed into my brother's drinks?" The cardiac monitor's steady beeping was the only sound for 3 endless seconds. Every face in that room turned toward my little girl, then toward my mother-in-law Francine, whose perfectly manicured hand had just gone to her throat. The ICU's fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright, too harsh, exposing secrets that had been hiding in our home for months. My name is Bethany, and 48 hours ago I thought my biggest problem was surviving another passive-aggressive dinner with my live-in mother-in-law. I'm 38 years old and I've been teaching 4th grade at Riverside Elementary for 12 years. People always tell me I have the patience of a saint, dealing with 25 9-year-olds every day. They had no idea that my real test of patience was waiting for me at home every evening, criticizing my cooking, my parenting, my very existence. My son Colton had just turned 16 the month before. He was everything a mother could hope for: straight-A student, varsity swim team captain, volunteering at the animal shelter on weekends. College scouts had already started showing interest. He had this way of lighting up a room when he walked in, all 6 feet of teenage energy and optimism. Now he lay unconscious in that hospital bed, tubes down his throat, machines breathing for him, because someone he trusted had been systematically poisoning him. Standing in the corner of the room, my husband Roger gripped the bed rail so tight his knuckles had gone white. Roger, my husband of 17 years, the man who managed 3 bank branches and could negotiate million-dollar loans, but couldn't stand up to his mother when she insulted me at the dinner table. He'd been nodding along when Francine called me weak and pathetic just minutes ago, and now his face was cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the first dawning of a horrible realization. Francine stood by the window, her silver hair perfectly styled as always, wearing the cashmere sweater Colton had given her for Christmas. She'd moved in with us 6 months ago after hip surgery, turning our peaceful home into her personal kingdom, where she ruled with cutting remarks and constant criticism. She was 64, a retired pharmacist who never let anyone forget she'd graduated top of her class and knew more about medications than any of these young doctors today. And then there was Melody, my quiet 8-year-old daughter, barely 4 feet tall in her purple sneakers, clutching her little backpack like a shield. She took piano lessons on Thursdays, loved reading books about spies and detectives, and had this uncanny ability to remember everything she saw and heard. While other kids her age were lost in video games, Melody observed the world with those deep brown eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. "What is this child talking about?" Francine's voice cut through the silence, but it wavered just slightly. She straightened her sweater, a gesture I'd seen her do 1,000 times when she was about to launch into one of her lectures about proper behavior or family values. Dr. Martinez, who'd been treating Colton since the ambulance brought him in, looked from Melody to Francine, then to me. He was young, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes that had seen too much tragedy in the ER. "Perhaps we should hear what the young lady has to say," he said carefully. The room held 7 people, including us, our family, Dr. Martinez, and 2 nurses who'd been adjusting Colton's IV when this bomb dropped. Everyone waited, everyone watched, and my 8-year-old daughter, the same little girl who still slept with a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Hoppy, stood there holding evidence that would destroy everything we thought we knew about our family. This is the story of how the smallest person in our family saved my son's life and exposed a darkness that had been living under our roof, eating at our table, and slowly poisoning not just my son's body, but our entire family's trust. It started with mysterious headaches and ended with handcuffs, but the journey between those 2 points would reveal just how far someone would go to maintain control, and how a watchful little girl became our unlikely hero. Life before that terrible Tuesday had been manageable chaos, the kind every working mother knows too well. I'd wake up at 5:30 each morning, stealing 30 precious minutes of quiet with my coffee before the house came alive. Those moments in my kitchen, watching the sunrise paint the sky pink through our window, were my sanctuary. By 6, I'd be packing lunches, signing permission slips, and trying to remember if it was Colton's swim practice or Melody's piano lesson after school. Our house on Maple Street had been perfect for our family of 4 until it became 5. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a finished basement that Colton had claimed as his study space. The walls were covered with his swim medals and academic achievement certificates. Roger and I had worked so hard to afford this neighborhood with its good schools and safe streets where kids still rode bikes until the streetlights came on. Everything changed when Francine moved in after her hip surgery in January. Just for a few weeks, Roger had promised, when he helped his mother settle into our guest room, until she can manage the stairs at her condo. But February turned to March to April, and by June, she'd somehow relocated half her belongings into our home and established herself as the household authority on everything from proper nutrition to child discipline. Bethany never seasons the pot roast properly, Francine announced that Sunday, 2 weeks before Colton's collapse, pushing her plate away dramatically. No wonder Colton's so skinny. In my day, we knew how to feed growing boys. Roger just nodded, cutting his meat silently while I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Colton and Melody exchanged glances across the table, a silent sibling communication they'd perfected since Grandma's arrival. "I'm not skinny, Grandma," Colton said quietly. "Coach says I'm at the perfect weight for my height. My times have never been better." "Coaches don't know nutrition," Francine declared, standing up with the authority of someone who'd run a pharmacy for 30 years. "That's why I've been making you those special protein shakes. You need proper supplementation if you're going to make it to that fancy swim camp." The swim camp, Colton's golden ticket. He'd been accepted to the Aquatic Excellence Program in California, an intensive 8-week summer camp that had launched 3 Olympic swimmers in the past decade. College scouts monitored every participant. It would mean being away from home for 2 months, but the opportunity was incredible. "Grandma's shakes taste weird," Colton had mentioned the previous Monday, setting the empty glass in the sink with a grimace. Francine laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Champions don't complain about medicine that makes them stronger. Your grandfather never complained when I took care of him." Roger's father had died 10 years ago from complications of diabetes. Francine had been his primary caregiver for the last 5 years of his life, managing his medications with military precision. She'd often reminded us how she'd sacrificed her career to care for him, how ungrateful he'd been, how he'd wanted to die in some nursing home instead of at home where family belonged. The headaches started in early June. At first, Colton brushed them off. "Just stress, Mom. Finals, swim practice, getting ready for camp, I'm fine." But I watched my vibrant son become someone else. He'd fall asleep during dinner conversation. His Saturday morning runs became afternoon stumbles around the block. The boy who could do 50 laps without breaking a sweat was suddenly exhausted after climbing our stairs. "Maybe he's overtraining," Roger suggested, always looking for the simple explanation. "He needs more iron," Francine insisted, producing a bottle of supplements from her massive collection. She'd turned our hall closet into a pharmacy with bottles of vitamins, minerals, and things I couldn't pronounce lined up like soldiers. The Friday before everything fell apart, I found Colton asleep at his desk at 7 in the evening, his calculus homework half finished, drool pooling on the paper. When I tried to wake him, his eyes were unfocused, pupils dilated. "Just tired from practice, Mom," he mumbled, but the words came out slurred. "Did you take anything? Any medication?" "Just Grandma's vitamins, the white ones and the yellow ones. She said they'd help with the headaches." I confronted Francine that night after the kids were in bed. "What exactly are you giving Colton?" She looked at me with such disdain I actually stepped back. "I'm keeping that boy healthy since his mother clearly can't. Do you know what those swim camps are like? The pressure? He needs to be prepared, not coddled. He needs to see a doctor about these headaches." "Doctors," she scoffed. "They'll just run expensive tests and prescribe things that make it worse. I know what I'm doing, Bethany. I've forgotten more about medicine than you'll ever know." Roger walked in during our confrontation, looked between us, and chose his mother. "Mom's just trying to help, Beth. Don't be so paranoid." That was Friday night. By Tuesday morning, my son was fighting for his life, and my quiet 8-year-old daughter was about to reveal that she'd been documenting our family's descent into nightmare. Tuesday morning started with Melody screaming, not the frustrated shriek of a child who couldn't find her favorite shirt, but a primal sound of pure terror that sent me flying up the stairs, my coffee mug shattering on the kitchen floor. I found her standing in Colton's doorway, her small body trembling, pointing at her brother's crumpled form on the bedroom floor. Colton lay twisted beside his desk, his lips tinged blue, white foam gathered at the corners of his mouth. His eyes had rolled back, showing only whites, and his chest barely moved. The swim team poster above him seemed to mock us with its bold letters, "Champions never quit." "Call 911, I screamed at Roger, who stood frozen in the hallway. My hands shook as I turned Colton on his side, remembering the recovery position from a CPR class I'd taken years ago. His skin felt cold, clammy, wrong. The ambulance ride was 7 minutes that lasted 7 years. The paramedics worked over my son, inserting IVs, checking vitals, speaking in codes I didn't understand. "Possible overdose," one said into his radio. 16-year-old male, unconscious, respiratory depression. "He doesn't do drugs," I shouted over the siren. "He's an athlete. He wouldn't even take aspirin without asking." At Riverside General, they rushed Colton away while a nurse led us to a small waiting room with outdated magazines and chairs designed for discomfort. Dr. Martinez appeared after an eternity that the clock claimed was 40 minutes. "Your son overdosed on prescription opioids," he said, his voice gentle but direct. "We're running additional tests to determine the exact combination, but his blood work shows dangerous levels of oxycodone and at least one other substance we haven't identified yet." "That's impossible," Roger shouted, his banker's composure finally cracking. "Colton would never touch drugs. We've talked about this. He knows what's at stake with his swimming career." "My son is not a drug user," I insisted, my voice breaking on the last word. "Test again. Your machines must be wrong." Dr. Martinez shook his head slowly. "I understand this is shocking, but the tests are conclusive. The levels in his system suggest regular use over several weeks, possibly months. The good news is we got him in time. He's on naloxone and responding. But we need to understand how this happened to prevent it from happening again." That's when Francine arrived, her heels clicking against the hospital tile like a countdown to disaster. She surveyed the waiting room with the disgust she usually reserved for my housekeeping, then settled her gaze on me. "Well," she announced loudly enough for the entire nursing station to hear, "addiction runs in families, just like his mother, weak and pathetic." The words hung in the air like poison gas. 2 nurses exchanged uncomfortable glances. One quietly excused herself from the room. Another busied herself with paperwork, her shoulders tense with secondhand embarrassment. Roger actually nodded slightly, a small bob of his head that felt like a knife between my ribs. That tiny gesture of agreement with his mother's cruelty destroyed something fundamental between us. "Roger, how could you agree with that?" My voice came out as a whisper. He shifted uncomfortably. "Mom's not entirely wrong, Beth. Your sister had problems. Maybe we should have been watching for signs." "My sister had chronic pain from a car accident." The words exploded out of me. "She had 3 surgeries and a metal rod in her spine. She was never an addict. She managed legitimate pain with legal prescriptions until the day she died. My sister Jennifer had been killed by a drunk driver 2 years after her initial accident. Not that Francine cared about facts when she could twist a narrative to her advantage. Francine's smirk was the expression of someone who'd won a game only they knew they were playing. Denial. Classic enabler behavior. Poor Colton never stood a chance with you as his mother, always making excuses, never seeing the obvious signs." "What signs?" I demanded. "The exhaustion from studying and training? The headaches from stress? Those aren't signs of drug use, they're signs of being a dedicated student athlete." "Or," Francine said, examining her manicured nails with theatrical indifference, "they're signs of a boy who found his mother's old pills and decided to experiment. You did keep Jennifer's medications after she died, didn't you? For memories?" "I donated everything to the medication disposal program at the police station. You watched me do it." "Did I? My memory isn't what it used to be." Her smile was sharp as broken glass. Dr. Martinez returned with a tablet in his hand, his expression even more serious. We've identified multiple substances in your son's system. This wasn't recreational use. The combination and levels suggest systematic ingestion over time. Someone's been giving your son a carefully measured cocktail of medications. Someone's been poisoning my son? My legs nearly gave out. Roger caught my arm, his face pale. "Let's not jump to conclusions," Roger said, but his voice wavered with the first seeds of doubt. "The pattern is very specific," Dr. Martinez continued. "Whoever did this had pharmaceutical knowledge. They knew exactly how much to give without causing immediate fatal overdose, but the cumulative effect was building toward organ failure." That's when I noticed Melody sitting in the corner, her small hands folded in her lap, watching everything with those observant eyes that missed nothing. She'd been quieter than usual since we'd arrived at the hospital, clutching her little purple backpack like it contained state secrets. She stood up slowly, walked past all of us adults with determined steps, and tugged on Dr. Martinez's white coat. In her clear, small voice, she said the words that changed everything. "Sir, should I show you what Grandma mixed into my brother's drinks?" The room fell silent after Melody's words, the kind of silence that comes before an earthquake when even the birds stop singing. Francine's face went from smug satisfaction to the pale shade of fresh paper in less than a second. Her perfectly manicured hand gripped the arm of her chair so tight I could see her knuckles straining against the skin. "What nonsense is this child spouting?" Francine's voice pitched higher than usual, the carefully cultivated authority cracking like thin ice. "She's always had an overactive imagination. Last month, she claimed the neighbor's cat could read her mind." "That's not true," Melody said calmly, still looking up at Dr. Martinez. "I said the cat always knows when I'm sad. That's different from reading minds, Grandma." Dr. Martinez knelt down to Melody's eye level, his expression serious but kind. "What do you mean about mixing things into drinks, sweetheart?" Melody opened her purple backpack with deliberate care, like she was handling something precious and dangerous at the same time. She pulled out her phone, the old iPhone 8 I'd given her for emergencies only, with its cracked screen protector and unicorn case. "I record things when I'm scared," she said simply, her small fingers navigating to her videos. "Grandma scares me. She says mean things when nobody else is around. She told me once that if I told anyone about her special medicines, something bad would happen to Colton." "You little liar!" Francine shot up from her chair, but Roger stepped between her and Melody. It was the first time I'd seen him physically oppose his mother. "Mom, let her talk," Roger said, his voice steady but his hands shaking. "She's been brainwashed by Bethany." Francine pointed at me with a trembling finger. "This is all part of her plan to get me out of the house. She's using the children as weapons." Dr. Martinez looked at me, then at Roger. "May I see what your daughter has recorded?" I nodded, moving closer to Melody, placing my hand protectively on her shoulder. She looked up at me with those brown eyes that had been carrying this terrible burden alone. "I'm sorry, Mommy. I wanted to tell you, but Grandma said if I did, Colton would get sicker." "Oh, sweetheart," I pulled her against me, feeling her small body tremble. "You're so brave. You're doing the right thing." Melody handed the phone to Dr. Martinez. The first video was dated 3 weeks ago, 5:47 a.m. according to the timestamp. The image was shaky, filmed from behind the kitchen doorframe, but the content was crystal clear. Francine stood at our kitchen counter using the back of a spoon to crush several white pills into powder. The early morning light from the window illuminated her actions perfectly. "This will slow you down enough," Francine's recorded voice muttered as she mixed the powder into Colton's chocolate protein shake. "No swim camp for you, no leaving me alone all summer. Someone needs to stay home and take care of me properly." Roger made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. "Mom, what did you do?" "That's not me," Francine shrieked. "That video is fake. These kids know all about technology. They can fake anything nowadays." But Melody was already scrolling to the next video, dated 5 days later. This time, Francine was adding drops from a small amber bottle to Colton's sports drink, the blue Gatorade he always took to morning practice. "Your mother thinks she's so perfect." Francine's voice came through the phone speaker. "Let's see how perfect she looks with a drug-addicted son. Let's see Roger choose her over me when their golden boy is a junkie." The third video was from just yesterday morning. Francine was crushing more pills, many more than in the first video. If they're getting suspicious, I need to make it look real. Make it look like he took them himself, stupid boy asking questions about the taste. Dr. Martinez immediately stood up and walked to the door, calling for security. We need officers here now. This is evidence of attempted murder. You can't believe this! Francine's composed facade finally shattered completely. I'm his grandmother. I love that boy. I would never hurt him. You just watched yourself poisoning him, I said, my voice deadly quiet. You systematically drugged my son because you didn't want him to go to swim camp? He was going to abandon me. The words tore out of Francine like a confession ripped from her soul. Just like my husband did, just like Roger would have if I hadn't kept him close. First the camp, then college, then he'd never come home. I'd be alone. Roger staggered backward until he hit the wall. Dad didn't abandon you. He died. He had diabetes and he died. He wanted to die to get away from me. Francine was sobbing now, ugly tears destroying her perfect makeup. I heard him telling the nurse he was tired, so tired. I did everything for him and he still wanted to leave me. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway as Dr. Martinez showed them the videos. Francine looked around wildly like a trapped animal seeking escape. I knew the doses. I was a pharmacist for 30 years. I calculated everything. I just wanted to make him need to stay home, to need me. But you increased the dose, I said, understanding flooding through me like ice water. When I started asking questions, when I said he needed to see a doctor, you increased it to make it look like he was secretly using. You were always too nosy, too controlling. Francine spat at me, asking about my medications, counting my pills, watching me like I was some criminal. I had to protect myself. So you tried to kill my son to frame me as a bad mother? The words came out in a whisper because if I spoke any louder, I would scream and never stop. The security guards moved toward Francine, but she backed against the window, her eyes wild and unfocused. You don't understand. None of you understand what it's like to be invisible, to be forgotten. I gave everything to this family. Mom, please. Roger's voice cracked like a teenager's. Just stop talking. Please stop talking. But Francine was beyond stopping, the dam of her secrets breaking after months of careful construction. I saved every receipt, every text message where Bethany complained about Colton being tired. I documented her neglect, her failure to get him medical attention. When they found the drugs in his system, who would they blame? The mother who ignored all the warning signs. Dr. Martinez had his phone out, recording everything now. Mrs. Francine, you're admitting to deliberately poisoning your grandson? I was medicating him, she shrieked. There's a difference. I know pharmacology. I studied drug interactions for 30 years. The oxycodone was just to make him sleepy, to keep him home. The muscle relaxants were to affect his swimming times, make him think he wasn't ready for camp. The antidepressants were to make him malleable, agreeable. Antidepressants? I felt sick. You gave him antidepressants on top of opioids? In specific combinations, they create dependency without immediate danger, Francine said, slipping into her lecturer voice, the one she used when explaining why everyone else was wrong about everything. I had it all calculated, but then you started interfering, watching him too closely. I had to increase the doses to speed up the timeline. What timeline? Roger asked, though he looked like he didn't want to know the answer. The timeline for him to need rehabilitation, of course. A nice long stay at home instead of swim camp, maybe a gap year before college to recover. Time for him to realize family is more important than championships and scholarships. Melody spoke up from beside me, her voice small but clear. She put stuff in my juice, too. Every head in the room snapped toward my daughter. My blood turned to ice in my veins. What? The word came out as a roar from Roger, who looked ready to physically destroy his mother. Just vitamins, Francine said quickly. Just vitamins to keep her healthy. Melody shook her head. They made me sleepy during school. Mrs. Peterson sent a note home saying I kept falling asleep during reading time. That's when I started pretending to drink my juice and pouring it in the sink. You poisoned both my children? I moved toward Francine, but Dr. Martinez caught my arm. We need to test your daughter immediately, he said to me, then turned to the security guards. Call the police. This is attempted murder of a minor and child endangerment. I want my lawyer, Francine demanded, trying to summon her imperious attitude, but her voice shook. "This is entrapment. That child was coached. Check her phone for evidence of coaching." "Please do check her phone," I said. "Check everything. Check the dates and times. Check when these videos were taken. My 8-year-old daughter was documenting your crimes while you were committing them." One of the security guards was already on his radio, calling for police backup. The other stood blocking the door, his hand resting on his belt. Francine looked between them, calculating, then suddenly lunged toward Melody. "Give me that phone, you little spy, you devious little brat!" I moved without thinking, putting myself between Francine and my daughter. Her nails raked across my cheek as Roger grabbed his mother from behind, pulling her away from us. The struggle was brief but violent, Francine fighting like someone possessed, screaming accusations and threats. "You turned my son against me. You were always too proud, too independent. I had to show him what you really are. A failure. A terrible mother who can't even protect her own children." "Mom, stop!" Roger had tears streaming down his face as he held his mother's arms. "Please, just stop." The police arrived within minutes, 2 officers who listened to Dr. Martinez's summary while watching Melody's videos. They read Francine her rights while she alternated between sobbing and screaming about ungrateful families. "I did everything right," she wailed as they cuffed her. "The doses were perfect. I kept notes. I have 3 notebooks full of calculations. Check my room. You'll see how careful I was." "Ma'am, you're admitting to keeping records of poisoning your grandchildren?" one officer asked, incredulous. "Records of their medication schedule," Francine corrected. "I was helping them. Colton needed to learn that family comes first. Melody needed to be less observant, less sneaky. It's not normal for a child to spy on her grandmother." "It is when her grandmother is a monster," I said quietly. As they led her away, Francine turned back one last time. "He would have left me. They all leave. First my husband, then Roger when he married you, then Colton. I couldn't let it happen again." The door closed behind them, and the silence that followed was deafening. Roger collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. Melody pressed against my side, finally letting herself cry. Dr. Martinez immediately ordered blood work for Melody and a psychiatric evaluation for when Colton woke up. "Your daughter saved your son's life," Dr. Martinez told me quietly. "Without her evidence, we might have treated this as a standard overdose. The specific medications she documented will help us counteract the effects more precisely." I looked down at my brave little girl, who had carried this terrible secret while gathering evidence to save her brother. "How long have you been recording her, sweetheart?" "Since she moved in," Melody whispered. "She was mean to you when Daddy wasn't looking. I wanted to show him, but then she started hurting Colton and I got really scared." Colton woke up 3 days later, confused and disoriented. His first word, a hoarse, "Mom?" that made me sob with relief. The doctors explained everything while he stared at the ceiling, processing the betrayal in silence. When they told him about Melody's videos, he asked to see his sister immediately. "You saved my life, Mel," he said when she climbed carefully onto his hospital bed, mindful of the IV lines. "You're like those spies in your books." "I was scared," she admitted, curling into his side. "Grandma said if I told anyone, you'd die." "But you told anyway when it mattered most. That's real bravery, kiddo." The medical team kept Colton for 2 weeks, running tests and monitoring his kidney function. The damage was significant, but not permanent. With proper treatment and time, he would recover fully. The swim camp director called personally, offering to hold his spot for the following year. "We've never had a student overcome something like this," she said. "That kind of strength is exactly what we look for in our athletes." Roger filed for divorce the day after his mother's arrest. Not from me, but from the toxic hold she'd maintained on him for 41 years. "I'm sorry, Beth. I'm so sorry I didn't see it. I didn't believe you. I chose her over you so many times, and I almost lost everything that actually matters." We started couples counseling immediately, along with family therapy for all 4 of us. Roger had to confront the reality that his mother had been emotionally manipulating him since childhood, using guilt and obligation as weapons. The therapist helped him understand that his father's death hadn't been an escape but a tragedy, and that Francine had twisted that narrative to maintain control. The police investigation uncovered 3 notebooks in Francine's room, meticulously documenting her poisoning schedule. She'd recorded dosages, times, Colton's reactions, and her plans to escalate if necessary. She'd even written contingency plans for framing me, including planning empty pill bottles in my car and calling Child Protective Services with anonymous tips about my negligent parenting. Her pharmacy colleagues testified at the trial. Several admitted they'd noticed medications going missing over the years but hadn't reported it, because Francine always had explanations. She'd been stockpiling for months before moving in with us, planning this scenario while pretending her hip surgery recovery required our help. The prosecutor found similar patterns in Francine's past. Her husband's diabetes medications had been inconsistently effective, according to medical records. 2 of Roger's cousins had mysteriously fallen ill during family visits, recovering only after leaving her house. The pattern stretched back decades, a twisted need for control disguised as caretaking. Francine was convicted of attempted murder, assault, and child endangerment. The judge sentenced her to 15 years, with mandatory psychiatric treatment. During sentencing, she still insisted she'd done nothing wrong, that she was protecting her family from abandonment. The courtroom was packed with her former victims, people who'd suffered under her care and never understood why. Melody still carries that purple backpack everywhere, though now it holds art supplies instead of surveillance equipment. Her therapist says she's processing remarkably well, understanding that her vigilance saved her brother's life. She's joined a young writers' club at school, turning her observation skills into creative stories about brave children who solve mysteries. Colton returned to swimming 4 months later, his times initially slower, but his determination stronger. He speaks at schools now about recognizing abuse, even from family members, especially from those who claim to love you. Poison doesn't always come in a bottle, he tells his audiences. Sometimes it comes disguised as care from people you're supposed to trust. Roger sold his mother's condo and used the money to establish a fund for families affected by medical abuse. He's rebuilding his relationship with his children, learning to be present without his mother's voice in his head telling him he's inadequate. The healing is slow, but it's real. Last week I was tucking Melody into bed when she asked, "Do you think Grandma really loved us?" I thought carefully before answering. I think she loved the idea of controlling us. Some people confuse love with possession. Real love means wanting people to grow and thrive, even if that means they grow away from you. Like how you're happy Colton's going to swim camp next summer, even though you'll miss him? Exactly like that, sweetheart. As I write this, Colton is packing for California, finally heading to the camp he nearly died for refusing to give up. Melody is teaching herself video editing, turning her documentary skills toward happier subjects. Roger and I are stronger than before, bonded by survival and the determination to never again let toxic people disguise abuse as love. The most dangerous poison isn't always in a bottle. Sometimes it comes wrapped in family ties, delivered with guilt and manipulation by those who claim to care the most. But the antidote is truth, courage, and the fierce love of a little girl who knew something was wrong and refused to let her family's secrets destroy us. Our story is a reminder that heroes come in all sizes, that abuse can hide behind any door, and that sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the most powerful truth. Listen to your children when they're afraid. Believe them when they show you evidence. And never, ever let anyone make you doubt your instincts when it comes to protecting your family. Thank you for listening to our story. If it resonated with you, if it reminded you to trust your instincts or watch for signs of abuse in your own family, please share this video. Your share might help another family recognize the poison in their midst before it's too late. Leave a comment with your thoughts or your own experiences with family members who confused control with love. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories of survival, courage, and the unexpected heroes among us. Remember, vigilance isn't paranoia when someone's actually trying to hurt your children. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and protect the ones you love.